tonight we are diving into past lives and soul memory and how to recognize these moments even when you can't recognize them at first. So it can be that feeling of knowing someone the moment you meet them. It could be an emotion that seems to come out of nowhere. It could be being drawn to a skill or a place that really doesn't quite make sense in this lifetime. So tonight we're going to be talking about what these moments mean, how to recognize them, and why this time of the year they seem to surface more than others. So merry meet, welcome. I am Aislin. This is Ask Aislin, and tonight we are talking about past lives and soul memory. So welcome to those who are joining us live. Say hi in the chat. Let us know that you are here, and also let me know if the microphone sounds okay. We're going to dive in. We've got a lot to talk about tonight. And if you are here with us live or watching in replay, leave a heart or thumbs up. This will help us get it out to the feed of more people. We will have a Q&A at the end, like always. You can leave your questions and comments in the chat. So we're going to dive in. We're going to first start by talking about what is soul memory, what are past lives, and then we're going to be talking about different ways to recognize them and also some of practices that you can implement in your own life that will help you do some of this work, and then also some ways that you could continue this work after this episode. All right, so we are diving in, and we're going to talk about past lives, right? So this is not just about collecting stories. So sometimes when people think of past lives, they will tell all these stories of the different lives that they had, the different people that they were. You know, there's always this joke that goes around about past lives, like not everybody could have been Cleopatra, right? But there's so many people who say they were Cleopatra in another life, just to name one example. But this kind of work, when it comes to the working at this from a spiritual perspective, this isn't just about collecting stories or understanding the people that you were in other lives. It's really about understanding the patterns and understanding the energetic imprints and how they affect you here in this present life. So, what is soul memory? Soul memory is energetic residue that will exist from previous lifetimes. It essentially is stored in the subtle bodies of us. And so, just to kind of review what the subtle bodies are, or this may be the first time of people hearing about it, we have a physical body, obviously, but we also have an energetic body, we have an emotional body, we have a mental body, and we have what is called the soul body. And the soul body is really some might call this the soul, some might call this the higher self. This is this part of us that connects to something outside of us, and it's also the part of us that stays from incarnation to incarnation. So it's going to carry a lot of memory within it. But the problem is that it's not accessible to everyone easily. Otherwise, everyone would remember all of their past lives. And part of our work in this lifetime is coming here to try to figure out why we're here and what we're here to work on. If we knew all the answers, there really wouldn't be any work to do. So we forget a lot of this, even though it's stored within our soul memory and within our soul body. Now, the more shadow work we do, the more energy work we do, the more blockages that we clear, the easier it is to get past all of these other bodies that are the ones that are connected to this present lifetime to actually access that deeper layer. Once we access that deeper layer, it's easier to connect to our guides, it's easier to connect to deities, it's easier to connect to the higher self, and it's easier to connect to our past lives. So in our past lives, so within that soul body, different things that can be stored there are emotional imprints. So emotions that are carried from lifetime to lifetime. It can be our inherent gifts. They could be spiritual or they could be mundane. It can be our traumas that we carry from life to life. It can be unfinished lessons. And sometimes there are lessons, there's work that we are doing that carries across from lifetime to lifetime. And sometimes those lessons actually need to extend over more than one lifetime. So this is why doing past life work, especially when we're doing deep soul work, can be so important, because it will highlight some of those areas, some of those patterns, some of those lessons. It will help you to tap into the work that you're meant to be doing here. Now, let's clarify the difference between past life stories, like I talked about in the beginning, the narratives. This is just simply the story of perhaps what we did in a past life, perhaps how we died, perhaps unfinished business, people that we knew, roles that we had. This is the narrative of the story. Now, the past life imprint is the way that the past life affects you in the present. And that's what's going to be most important to you here in your soul work, in your quest to evolve spiritually. Now, this episode is mainly going to focus on that. It's going to focus on how past lives and past life imprints show up in your present life, how to tell what they are. This episode will focus less on the dramatic expression of the actual past life story. Now, if you want to know more about how to tap into, past life stories, I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. But just know in our Shadow Seekers membership, we do go into this much more deeply. We do past life regressions in there with plans to do more. And we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. So let us talk a little bit about, I just wanted to start with a personal connection of my own. So I'm going to actually tell you two kind of connections I have to past lives, how I came to understand them, and how those became part of my shadow work, part of my energy work, and part of my soul work. But let me just jump in first and let's say hi to those who are joining us live in the chat. So Merry Meet to Andrea and Kurt, Merry Meet to Jenny and Cersei. Welcome everybody. Tom is here. Welcome. Thanks for letting me know the mic is doing good tonight, even though it's Mercury retrograde. Welcome to Elizabeth and to Amy and Jen. Merry Meet everybody. So I also welcome you to share some of your experiences with past lives, whether it's like a past life regression you've done or these kind of imprints that we're going to talk about in this episode. Share in the chat. Everybody loves to learn from each other and hear all of your stories too. So let me start with one story that I'm going to tell you about a little bit later. Are these threads that I started to pull together from multiple different lifetimes that have to do with dying in childbirth and losing children prematurely. And so these were threads that I started to pull together. Now I'm going to tell you at the end of this episode, I'm going to tell you all those threads and how I pulled them together and the kind of work I'm doing with them right now. But I wanted to open with another past life memory that resurfaced for me quite a bit of time ago. And this was, so when I had gone to a spiritual healer, a spiritual mentor back in Sedona. This is going back like 15, probably 15, 16 years ago. As part of a spiritual kind of retreat package, I had a past life regression, and it was the first one that I'd ever had. And during that past life regression, it came out that I had drowned in a past life. Now, all of a sudden, things began to make sense. And so, like, if you ever do a regression like that and something sort of comes out that you didn't know before, sometimes you'll be able to look back at experiences in this life and you will be able to make some connections. So, number one, I always had this major problem of putting my head underwater. So I grew up in a house that had a pool. I really didn't like the pool. Had a lot of issues with putting my head underwater, in particular, like water in my nose and in my mouth and in my throat. And so all of that sort of came back to hit me when this past life regression came out. So things like that can surface for you. That helps us to understand perhaps where that aversion to swimming in particular is no problem like just swimming, but I had always had this problem putting my head under the water. But it helps to explain where that aversion would come from. If a person would then re-experience emotions or parts of their death in a past life, there's going to be some kind of an aversion probably to that in the present. So as we go further in, we're going to talk about different clues that you can look for in your present life like that will help you start to piece together some of your past life stories, even if you don't do a past life regression. Now mine, it just simply kind of the aversions backed up the regression that I had done. But you don't necessarily have to have the regression done in order to do this work. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm about to go through a bunch of different ways and signs that you can tell that past life stuff is coming up for you. So as I go through this list, there's like about 5 or 6 different things on it. Let us know in the chat which of these you resonate with, because the ones that you resonate with, well, they tend to be the pathway that's opening up for you right now. So if you're wondering how to do past life work, these are going to be the pathways for you to explore in greater detail and greater depth. So share in the comments with us as we go through this list signs that you are sensing a past life thread. Which of these are you resonating with? So the first common sign is an instant familiarity with a person in particular, or it could be a place or something else, but a lot of times it's a person. So people will feel sometimes like they've known a person before. So you probably, as spiritual and more elevated people than your average muggles out there, have probably had experiences like this, where you've come across a person and you felt this sort of instant knowing within them. So I know for myself, this has happened many times in my life as a spiritual leader. Meeting people on the spiritual path, a lot, especially a lot of the people that I have initiated into my coven, whether it's the online coven or the in-person coven over the years, there has been kind of this instant familiarity with that person. Now, that doesn't always mean, when we have an instant familiarity with a person, it doesn't always mean that we're meant to be with them long term. So there's sometimes been instant recognition of people that have kind of approached the coven but never initiated. For one reason or another, they left because they weren't a right fit, or because there were issues between the coven and this person, or they needed to do other work or something like that. But maybe I had had a familiarity. That familiarity means that they're in the right place. They've kind of come to this spot in the path that they're on. It didn't necessarily mean that they were meant to stay here, but it was part of the path. I've felt this familiarity when I started Shadow Seekers. So sometimes there would be names that would come through when people would join the membership. And I would have this instant recognition and feeling like I had known that person before, and they were meant to be here because perhaps we've known each other in a past life. There can also be this sense of of trusting someone immediately, but not knowing exactly why. And this could be because you knew that person in another life and you'd already built your trust with them then. Now, one thing I do want to mention is that not all deja vu is necessarily attached to a past life. So just because you have deja vu of a place or a person or an experience doesn't mean it's necessarily tied to a past life. Deja vu can come because perhaps you have dreamed it in the past. So sometimes deja vu has to do with precognitive dreaming. So this is where we dream of things that eventually happen. We don't always just dream of day residue or past residue. We can dream of future life residue, or perhaps there is this, at least this is my belief in kind of the future life, is that from this moment here going forward, you have a myriad of different decisions and paths you could take. And sometimes we dream about one of those paths, and once we get to that spot, we feel that familiarity looking backwards to a dream that we may not even remember, but that we had nevertheless. Now that particular deja vu to me doesn't seem connected to a past life. So just so you know, many of the things we're going to talk about tonight too could have other explanations. But if you see a lot of these things kind of clustering together around a certain person, situation, or place, chances are that that is related to a past life. So let us move on to the next one, but let us know in the chat if you have ever had that feeling of instantly meeting someone and feeling like you knew them before, or instantly being at a place and feeling like you had been there before. Now, the next way that a person could kind of notice that past life threads were coming into the present life is through emotional reactions that don't really match the current situation. So these can be feeling disproportionate fear. So this is fear that is out of alignment with the actual situation. There can be intense gratitude for a person that goes beyond the gratitude that like it feels like naturally should be felt in this lifetime. There could be intense loyalty that you feel to a person that seems to supersede what you should feel in this lifetime. There can be unexplained grief. In all of these cases, there are things that are not able to be explained by the relationship in this lifetime. Now, the reality is that not all unexplained emotions are past life related. Some could be ancestral or generational. And so in our Shadow Seekers membership over the weekend, we had a workshop on ancestral shadow work. And during that, we talked about telling the difference between sort of things that came to us because they're connected to the ancestors. So like maybe like emotions that come out of nowhere can be connected to our ancestral work. They can also be connected to the fact that many of us are empaths or spiritually sensitive. Sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between those two. And one of the things that I mentioned in our workshop over the weekend is that a lot of times when things are tied to ancestors or tied to past lives, they're like pervasive feelings, pervasive emotions that you feel through much of your life, as opposed to things that are tied to you empathically sensing energy. A lot of times that'll be an emotion that just kind of pops up and then goes away. So it's really about that pervasiveness of the emotion, which will tell us probably that it's tied to something more deeply like ancestral connections or past life connections, which honestly to me are very hard to see, to tell the difference between. And in really one of the things we can ask ourselves is where does the past life work end and the ancestral work begin? Especially because many of us may incarnate or reincarnate multiple times into the same family line. So past life work and ancestral work can go hand in hand. At the end of the day, I don't think it really matters like what the origin of the threads are. What's important is what you do with them in this present life and how you decide to work with them in order to kind of up level spiritually. Now, another thing that, another thread that could tell you that some past life stuff is coming in is through unusual gifts or skills that you have in this lifetime. So, different crafts, like connections to different crafts that you might do, healing abilities that you might have. Now, these may be things that were inherent. So, these could be things that you are just simply born with, and people always saw these things in you. These can also be awakened gifts. So sometimes, we're sort of unawakened because who knows, like we were just born into families that didn't support our gifts, or we were born into religions that stifled us. And then one day we kind of wake up out of that and we realize that we have all these gifts within us that we didn't realize at first. So whether these are gifts that, were always there from when you were born or ones that are awakened within you, the connection that they share is that these are things that seem to have come from a previous time. So for example, I sang before I spoke. At least that's what my those are the stories my mom tells. And so a gift like that, like musical gifts, artistic gifts that people are just born with, will often have some kind of a past life connection. These can also be spiritual practices. So just things that you know how to do spiritually, ways to connect to deities that you just seem to sense and know without ever being taught or told. These can be languages or symbols that seem familiar that are outside of the culture that you're born into in this lifetime. Like all of these could be signs that past life threads are coming into the present time. Now, other ways to tell that this are through repeating relationship patterns. Sometimes we will have dynamics with people that will extend over lifetimes. There may be the same type of conflict that seems to show up in this life and it resurfaces. And when it does, it feels familiar. It feels like this isn't the first time you've had this conflict, but it is the first time you've had it in this lifetime. So if that is true, then this may be ancestral, it may be past life related, it may be both. But the point is that it seems to be coming from something that's much deeper and much older than this life alone. This could also, there could also be a strong pull towards certain eras, certain cultures, certain deities, or certain places. So, for example, especially when these kind of pulls towards things come with a deep emotion. So, a little bit of my own story. I feel like I've told this before, but I feel much more comfortable when there are mountains around me and I can see the mountains. I didn't really realize this until I lived long term in a place that had mountains. So, when I was growing up in Indiana, it's very, very flat. I lived in northwest Indiana, but my family had a farm in central Indiana. There were many drives along from one place to the other. Very, very flat. You can many places you can see as far as the eye can see. It's just cornfields or fields. And I always felt a little out of sorts. I should actually say a lot out of sorts in that setting. In fact, I felt claustrophobic, which really makes no sense, right? How can a person feel claustrophobic? Because I'm not boxed in, but I felt boxed in. When I moved to California and I could see the mountains all around me, I was instantly at ease. Later, through doing a past life regression with a medium, in fact, it wasn't even a past life regression, it was just a thread that came out from the medium, was that I had a past life in the Pacific Northwest and I was very tied to the mountains there. So this immediately explains why would feel such an affinity for them, and then perhaps why I would feel so out of sorts when they weren't there. So you got to think to yourself too. Are there any places where you feel more comfortable than others? Are there any settings that you feel more comfortable than others? Time periods that you feel really drawn to? Cultures, deities, pantheons that you feel really drawn to? Now, growing up in the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s, early 2000s, I should say, a lot of the history and the mythology and the things that were taught in school, at least where I grew up in Indiana, we learned a lot about Greek mythology and we learned some Roman mythology, and that's about it. We didn't learn a lot of other mythology. So, it makes sense that a person, and I'm going to guess that a lot of that's very true for many of you. Now, I know with the younger generations, like the kids I work with in my educational therapy practice, they're learning history and mythology from a bunch of other cultures, thankfully, right? But at least for us, Greek, Roman, that's kind of what I learned. And so immediately I was taught, I was connected to the Greek and Roman deities because that's what I learned growing up. But I also had this connection to the Hindu deities that is unexplainable, based on, what I learned in this lifetime and the culture that I grew up in. So to me, that feels very connected to a past life, perhaps in India. So kind of think about the things that you feel drawn to, the time periods, the cultures, and these can be past life threads that are coming through for you as well. So I'm just going to jump into the chat here, and then we're going to talk about kind of how the past life threads can influence our current life. So Elizabeth said dream deja vu happens to her a lot. And Jenny said definitely feel like she knew someone before and he did too. So that will often be the case too, is like one, if you feel like you knew someone in the past, the other person may also share that feeling. Not all the time. Sometimes not everybody is like as awakened to all of this as others. But I definitely know when I met my boyfriend, I felt a past life connection, and he's not on this path like this spiritual path that I am on, but he also felt that past life connection. Like he had this memory of seeing me that reminded him of a memory from a past life. So oftentimes the two people will both feel it. Not all the time, but a lot of times they will. Andrea said, sometimes I get this overwhelming longing for a place and a time, but I don't know what or where this place is. And that's okay too. So to me, that's probably some kind of a past life memory coming through. It's just one that the residue isn't strong enough yet. Maybe you're not ready for that yet, but trust that that will come through. I feel like as soon as somebody starts to feel that, it will come through at some point. So maybe some of what we talk about tonight will help that resurface, or Andrea is in Shadow Seekers, so we'll continue to do past life meditations and regressions and work in there, and that can also help to figure out what your connection is to that place and what that place is. Okay, so share in the comments any of your experiences. Now let's talk about the areas of influence. So how do the past lives influence the present? So they can influence us through emotional triggers. Past lives, they will sometimes connect us to soul work that we are supposed to do in this lifetime through emotions. So we may feel these emotions come up. When emotions come up out of nowhere, again, they could be because you're feeling empathic energy with other people. It could also be because they are connecting you to something that you just can't remember in this lifetime yet. Past lives can also affect our relationship dynamics. So there can be karmic bonds that people have. There can be unfinished lessons that people have. Sometimes the lessons just weren't completed. Sometimes they weren't meant to be completed. They were meant to be carried through multiple lifelines and lifetimes. Sometimes there can be past alliances or tensions that you are feeling in the present life because you had an alliance or a tension with that person in a past life. Now, I've mentioned this, but it's worth mentioning again. Just because you have a soul connection to someone does not mean that you are meant to be with them forever in this lifetime. So sometimes you're meant to be together for a bit of time, and then you are meant to separate because the work done in this lifetime is done. I bring this up because I want to make sure that people, sometimes people, especially when they talk about like twin flame stuff and things like that, they feel like if they have a connection to a person, they must stay with that person. And sometimes they will endure abuse because they think they're supposed to stay because there's some kind of a past life or soul life connection. But just know that sometimes the work is meant to be done briefly, and then you learn the lesson and you separate and you move on. Other things, other ways that past life kind of threads can influence the present life is through our gifts, like we mentioned. So, our healing abilities, our intuitive senses, our artistic skills, maybe a spiritual lineage that's carried forward. So again, perhaps you worship certain deities in a past life, or you did certain religious practices in a past life, and then those carry into this present life as well. There can be resistances that you might have towards things, or phobias that you might have. So, like I explained the bit about putting my head underwater, connected to drowning in a past life. So, especially when there's really no origin in this lifetime for that phobia or that aversion you have, that often is a way that past life stuff is affecting you in the present. There can also be life themes. So there can be patterns that you've been working on across lifetimes. These patterns could be about boundaries, about visibility, about taking back power and having sovereignty. They can be about learning compassion for others, including yourself. So the list of themes that could come through from past lives and affect you in the present is endless. Those are only some possible ones. Now, before I go into a few practices that we'll end this with, I do want to talk just briefly about the energetics of the season. So why are we talking about past lives right now? So the reason we're talking about it right now is this is a very timely part of the wheel of the year for this kind of work. It's very much aligned. So we are still in Samhain season. Samhain season exists or starts at Samhain and then extends until Yule. The veils are quite thin. They are still quite thin at this time. Some people say, even there's actually some traditions that say the space from Samhain to Yule is like outside of time and space. So this is a great time. The dead are wandering around. So we have these connections to spirits, right? We have these connections to the ancestors, but we can also have these connections to our past lives. It's a peak time for ancestral remembering, for soul memory retrieval. This is also a great time for your intuition. So your intuition's just better. So when memories or threads come through, you are going to be better at intuitively knowing what they mean than maybe you would be in May, for example. Though the veils are thin in May, they're just thin in a slightly different way. There's also it's easier for dream messages to come through. So if you're somebody who has trouble dreaming, now is a great time to work on dreams because it's easier to dream at this time. Past life issues will arise more, and it'll be more easily accessible at this space where it's more of a liminal space, essentially. So if you've been feeling old emotions resurfacing, you are not doing anything wrong. I've heard from a lot of people saying, like, I'm more emotional, old stuff's coming up, and then they kind of feel bad about it. They feel like somehow that means that they're not doing a good job in their spiritual path, or they're missing something. And I'm here to tell you that it's just simply the doors are more open right now. The veils are thinner. We're in a more liminal space. And so it makes sense and it's natural that this would be coming through for you at this time. So let me just go back to the chat, and then I'm going to tell you a couple of different practices that you can use to sort of take this to the next level. So Jen said, she said, it's been wild. She said, the past few weeks with my ancestors. She said, so many synchronicities and so many messages coming through. Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me because this is the prime time for that to be happening. Okay, so working with soul memory. So how do we work with soul memory? So one practice is to really take the time to pause and reflect when it feels like some kind of a soul memory is coming through. What's going to happen is if we don't pause and we don't reflect on it, it's just going to move through, and then just sort of like dream stuff, it will dissipate into the ether and we may forget about it. Maybe there will be like some inkling that, oh, I need to go back and kind of work on that. To me, it's better just to, if you have the time and the space, to pause right when it's happening and really reflect on it. So when something unusually emotional comes up for you, or something really familiar happens, pause and just reflect. Is this mine from this lifetime? So you can just ask yourself that simple question. Is this mine from this lifetime, or does it feel older? And again, this is where, like, I feel like I repeat myself over and over again, but we all need to hear it so many times. This is where your intuition comes in. If you are immediately going to negate everything that comes through for you, you're going to have a lot of trouble doing this kind of work. So if you do have a lot of issues with your intuition and your belief in yourself, you have a lot of self-doubt, it's worth your time before doing any of this. It's worth your time really working on your solar plexus, working on your self-belief. We have other episodes that get into that on the Body Mind Witchcraft YouTube channel. So I've checked that out, and really start from that point, because in order to do this kind of work at this level, we're going to have to make a deal with ourselves that we're going to trust what's coming through and we're not going to immediately negate it. So you kind of ask yourself, is this older? If the answer feels like a yes, then you ask yourself, is this past lives or is this ancestral? And sometimes the answer can be mixed, right? Because again, like I said, where does past life work end and ancestral work begin, and vice versa? A lot of times it's the same kind of stuff. This alone, just pausing and acknowledging this past life thread coming through, this can be enough to really open up the intuitive channels. But like I said, don't second guess yourself. Now, in a second way to kind of do this work, we listen to the body, and you listen more for the somatics in the body, because there can be parts of the past that are actually stuck in the subtle bodies, which will find their way into the physical, because all of our bodies are stacked together like Russian nesting dolls, one on top of the other, and it's very hard to tell where one begins and the next ends, right? So looking for past life imprints within the body. So how would they show up? Well, it could feel like a tightness in a part of a body. This is also how like ancestral somatic stuff works as well. Noticing warmth in a part of the body. And this is often like, it could happen two different ways. It could be something that's just always there, a tension, a warmth that's always in that part of the body and never seems to leave, or it could pop up when the past life threads remind you of it. This can also be like a pulling in the solar plexus, a pulling in the heart. Both of these spaces are considered the center of your body. Some people feel it's more in the heart. Some people feel it's more in the solar plexus. But there can be this sort of pulling from that you sense in your body. And really, you're sensing it in your energetic body, but you feel it in your physical body as well. There can be buzzing or chills. I sometimes think that chills that come out of nowhere can lead us to a past life thread or to an ancestral thread or to something much deeper than the present. Noting these sensations in your body is going to be key here. So for me, there's a tightness in the left side of my abdomen, and I'm going to tell you in a little bit what I think that's all about. But kind of notice, where is the tightness in your body that's always there? And ask yourself, does it feel like it's deeper than this present time? Now, a third practice, if you like journaling and prompts, you can use prompts in your past life investigation. So you can ask things like, what does this energy remind me of? So this can see, and again, in order to do this, we got to be pretty keyed into our intuition, or at least have made the decision that we're going to listen to what pops into our head and not immediately negate it, right? So what does this energy remind me of? And then just sort of listen and sense what comes through, write it down. Maybe it won't make sense to you right away, but you write it down, and that way you'll be able to go back and reflect on it later. Another question, what emotion is strongest here? So when you feel something that feels deeper than this lifetime, it feels like it goes back farther, ask yourself, what emotion is strongest here? And that can help you to anchor into it. What repeating lesson is related to my past lives? Sometimes the repeated lessons don't always have to have anything to do with past lives or ancestral work, but they could. So, what repeating lesson is related to my past lives is another good prompt to use. Or what feels unfinished? So, what kind of things in your life feel unfinished, like they started and never had the chance to be completed? Now, with prompts, like all prompts, you can use them in traditional journaling. So you can just take the time to like write out what comes to you. And again, don't negate it or second guess it. You can do contemplation, where you just get into kind of a restful state and then you just think about the question. You can do card pulls. So you can ask these questions and you can pull a card and see what comes up for you if you like to do it that way. You can do a combination of all of these things. You can also do automatic writing or kind of like stream of consciousness writing, both of which can kind of look similar, and just take the prompt and it can look like journaling, but you really let go and you just let the thoughts just flow from you. It looks a little different than traditional journaling because you're trying to let go of the critic that's kind of always there and trying to analyze what you're writing. You don't want to analyze any of this, you just want to write. Now, another practice I recommend bringing in when doing soul memory and past life work is to making sure that you have a safe space for this kind of work. It's tough work, so you need to make sure that you are grounded. Most of us are not grounded, like we learned in last week's episode on psychic self-defense. So making sure we have good grounding practices in place while we're doing this work especially, but really we should have them all the time. Breathing techniques, so there can be inhibitory versus excitatory breathing. So inhibitory breathing brings the central nervous system down and calms you. So if you're getting really emotional, We want to do breath work that brings us down. But excitatory breath work, like breath of fire, burns and kind of purifies the mind and burns away some of the stuck and stagnant energy in the body, or at least gets it dislodged and moving. And that too, when we kind of dislodge some of the energy that's stuck, it can make these past life memories or threads surface. Now, how do we know if we should seek some deeper support? So, you don't need a dramatic regression experience in order to benefit from past life work. So, all the stuff that I talked about tonight, you can just start investigating the threads that are coming through, and you can do a ton of work just through that. You do not necessarily need these dramatic regression experiences. But if you do want them, you generally will need to find a place to go deeper with it. So whether that's finding regression meditations online, that is finding a mentor who can help you do regression, finding a group like Shadow Seekers where you have a container where other people are also doing it and you have people to talk to and share ideas with. You may want to go deeper with it if you feel like this is something you're really called to do. Also, if your past life work becomes really overwhelming, or if it becomes really confusing, or it's like so you're just the emotions are just so much that you can't really handle it, this would also be a time for you to potentially reach out for support or to put the work aside for the time. Do your grounding, do more practices like that, really work with your chakras, especially the lower chakras, and then return to the work. Also consider joining Shadow Seekers. Like I said, we do much more extensive work like this. So in Shadow Seekers, we have multiple different past life regression long meditations that people can do. We also have a full length workshop on the shadow work of past lives, and we actually have plans in the next couple of months to do a whole. Every year, my goal is to do a module on past lives because it's such important work and it's really interesting. People love doing it, and so we'll be doing a live module within the next few months also on past lives. So let me just kind of end here with a personal example of my own, and I'd love for you also to share in the chat any past life threads or stories that you have as well. So I've told you already about the kind of regression memory I had of drowning. I also began at one point to have these visions of like almost like a cave. I call it a cave. It was mostly because it was like stone and I was lying. I don't necessarily know if it looked exactly like me in this lifetime, but I had the sense that this was me. And I was lying dead on this stone, kind of in this ceremonial cave, and there was blood everywhere. And so this memory just surfaced, and it felt very intense, and it felt very much like a memory. And that's sometimes like, it's just the sense that this is something past life related, and I'm not going to negate this. And it kept coming to me. I would just have the vision of it. And so eventually it was confirmed by a medium, by that same medium. I never told her any of this. I told her pretty much nothing about me. And she confirmed that I had died multiple times in childbirth throughout different lifetimes. Now, presently, I am on a fertility journey. So I have almost died in this lifetime from an ectopic pregnancy. From what I was told, I was like literally minutes away, thank God, was able to be saved and had blood transfusions and, was able to come back from that. But present life, there's like a thread that's connecting this. And when I had the ectopic pregnancy, when I came out of that, more of these memories were surfacing. Now, obviously, here's the connection to the present life. If a person had died multiple times a certain way, they would likely struggle around that same issue in this present life. So it starts to explain a lot, right, about what's going on for me presently. But another thing that resurfaced even deeper, and then all of a sudden the somatic connection happened for me, is during the election last year, there were ads that were going around. And this is not about like politics or anything. I'm just explaining my experience and my trigger, that this triggered me. But there were ads that went around and they would include women who had died in this lifetime within the previous couple of years of ectopic pregnancies because they couldn't get care. And so when I would hear these ads or I would hear politicians talking about this, all of a sudden these intense memories and visions came back to me of a much more recent lifetime. Maybe I'm going to say in like the 50s, because the truck, the vehicle that I was in was like an old kind of 50s style Ford pickup truck. And there was a memory of driving down this gravel road at night in the back of the car, screaming and screaming. And then eventually kind of being in a field and dying in blood everywhere. And so I realized there was like another lifetime, like that was a memory of me dying, because I couldn't get any care for what was going on with me. Other things started to resurface, some of these other memories. Like, remember, the medium said it happened in multiple lifetimes. More of the memories started to resurface. In fact, there was one that was probably in like I would say like late 1800s, early 1900s, given the stuff kind of around me, and being in a kind of like a chair like this in a doctor's office and just blood, and there was a memory of me like holding in my guts almost. So there began to be like these somatic issues in my left abdomen. So remember I said I was going to talk about that. And so I started kind of working on this, and I knew this was energetic. I went to several doctors. I asked if there was something physically wrong with me. I went to a couple of my friend who's a massage therapist. I asked her about it as well. And everybody was like, no, this is like, it's muscle tension, but it feels like kind of energetic. And so I started doing some work on it, and more of the memories would resurface of me sort of like holding in myself and then eventually dying. And I experienced my death several times in this lifetime by like working through the somatics. So this is the reason I'm telling you all of this is because I think it helps to hear examples of how all of this comes together. But so this is like long-term work, right? That's going through multiple lifetimes. It brings us to the present, and so what do I do with it? Well, I continue to work here. So I'm going to continue to work with the solar plexus, with the root chakra and the sacral chakra, because that's where all of that energy is being stored. Working to release that, working to like kind of not clutch up when the memories come, and then just being open to them and see what they're trying to teach me, and then what I can do with it in this lifetime. So the work doesn't end immediately when we have the memories or we make the connection. That's kind of, to me, that's where the work begins. And the work can be a long-term work. So this is going to be a theme that I'm going to continue to explore. What does it mean? And also for you, you may have these inklings, and then something like can happen to you, like what happened to me with those political ads, when all of a sudden it was like, boom, that opened up all of these floods of memories of my past lives. So share in the comments any past life memories that you have, or any themes that you're connecting, or even any threads or inklings that you have. We would love to hear from you. And I'm going to move on now to the Q&A, but I hope that helped you. I hope that gave you a little perspective of how to recognize past life threads in this lifetime, how to maybe work with them a little bit, and then how to know when it's time to do some deeper work. So like I said, in our Shadow Seekers membership, we do this kind of work. This is one of the many things we do in the membership. We do go much deeper in that. And also, if people ever want to work with me just one-on-one, I also can lead past life regressions, and you get a much more deeper experience when you do it one-on-one than when you do it in the group or you do it on your own. So let us move on to the Q&A. I do have one great question that I'm gonna answer right now, and then that will give people a chance who are live to put the questions in the chat. This doesn't have to be related to past lives. It can be about anything witchcraft, shadow work, or energy work related. So this question is from Tom. He says, how do I handle this feeling like I'm not doing enough? Or like I feel like I can't ever do enough. Like no matter what, I'll be left behind. So Tom is referring to his spiritual practices here. But what I do want to mention, and for anybody who's relating to this question, like I feel like I'm never doing enough, or I'll never do enough, or I'll never get far enough, or progress enough, is this a pattern in other areas of your life? And this would, my guess would be yes, it is. So somebody who feels like they're not doing enough in their spiritual path probably also feels like they're not doing enough in another path in their life or another aspect of their life. And I think that sometimes this can be tied to like some of the shadow work that we need to do. This could be coming from past lives. This could be coming from ancestral stuff too. This could also be coming from things that we observed in our life when we were very young. There's likely to be other people who, kind of felt like they weren't doing enough, for example. So I have several ideas I'm going to share on this too. And one of the things I wrote here was the internet creates a sea of information, which on one hand is amazing. The access that we have to things now that we didn't have in the past. So when I was like a little kid, you couldn't just type in everything and get all these answers. And one of the ways I learned so much about stuff is that I just read constantly. Whenever I had a question, I went to the library or an encyclopedia and I would look it up. And so today it's the same thing. If I have a question, I Google it, of course now it gets harder to tell if things are true or not. But we have this access at our fingertips to everything that we want. But what that also means is there's positive benefits to that you can get information so quickly. But there's also negative effects of this, is that there's overwhelm. How do we know what's true? How do we know what's right? How it can also leave us feeling the way that Tom feels, like I'll never learn it all because there's too much out there. Now, believe me, I have bought so many online courses that have just sat there. I promised myself that someday I will get to them, or so many books that I haven't read. You are probably like me if you're a collector of books. You'll just never get to them all. But we need to learn how to be okay with that. There's only so much space within this lifetime, and there's no necessity to cram it all into this lifetime because you will have more lifetimes. And likely, the journey that you are on does not begin and end in this lifetime alone. It is one that will continue through from previous lifetimes into this one and then into future ones. So just really settle in. Ask yourself, what do you really want to learn the most right now? Knowing that you will never be able to accomplish or master all the information out there. When it comes to your witchcraft practice, when it comes to your spiritual path, what do you most want to focus on right now? And pick one or two things and focus on those things and and find a way to be okay with that. I am giving you permission to be okay with that. So hopefully that will help you a little bit. But just kind of think about that. What are you most drawn to and focus on that, knowing that you will not be able to accomplish it all. The other thing, though, that you can do is you can set up a goal for yourself. What is the goal with the practice, with the path right now? Try to make it a concrete goal, like maybe you want to master the tarot, which that is a big topic in and of itself, but it's one path, it's one topic, and it's one that's much more doable than somebody who wants to master everything there is to do about divination, for example, or master everything there is to do about witchcraft. So maybe working on lunar timing, and that becomes your focus. That can be a path that you can then do, and you will be able to tell when you have mastered, or you'll be better able to tell when you've mastered kind of the connection to lunar timing. It's easier to tell that than mastering witchcraft in general, right? So anyway, I hope that helps, and I hope that also helps others who may be, asking the same question or struggling with the same problem. So let me go into the chat and see if there's any other questions here for me, and then I'm going to tell you what's coming up. So Elizabeth said, what does the karmic number 0 mean when it comes to past life karma? I look it up and there's different answers. I'd like your perspective. So I think that you may not like my answer, but personally, why there's so many different answers is because they're coming from people who that's the answer for them. And the answer for them and the answer for me and the answer for you may not be the same answer. But that's oftentimes when you see so much conflicting information, especially about numbers, it's a lot of it, or symbols. You see a lot about symbols, but that's oftentimes what that's about. Personally, I think, zero is here's like my feelings on it. Zero is like the Ouroboros, right? The snake that is biting its tail, the beginning and the end. There is no beginning and the end. The beginning is the end and the end is the beginning. So I think when it comes to, karmic, zero as a karmic number, it's like the cycle of, and it's learning that the cycle that we're in is a cycle that started in previous lifetimes and that will continue into future lifetimes. And it reminds us to just be where we are in the cycle right now. But like what comes first, death or rebirth, right? Because, is death the beginning? Because that's the beginning of the next life, or is birth the beginning? So that can be also questions that to me, would come up around the karmic number zero. But I would really ask you, what do you think it means? Really settle into yourself, ask yourself, and don't negate what comes through. Cindy said, my great grandfather was Rainwater Ramsey. She said, I've seen him in my dreams, and during meditation, I feel myself drawn to early 1800s. Yeah, very cool. And so hopefully, maybe see those linkages, those threads that she's got coming through. Hopefully, those strengthen, and you learn more as you do more past life regressions and more past life work. And Cindy's also in Shadow Seekers, so you can always check out our past life regression videos. If you have any trouble finding them, let me know. But you may be able to get more insight into those connections that way. Elizabeth said, met past life memory recently. Her most past life, sorry, her most recent past life memory was in Jamaica recently at the waterfall. So sometimes being in a place, like we said, can trigger people to have those memories, right? And all of a sudden, some memories flood back, and maybe they're not full memories, they may just be fragments. But the important thing is that when you witness it and you experience it, you know deeply within you that it's a past life connection. And Elizabeth also said, I found that the past life memory turned into a retrieval. Does that happen often? So sometimes it can. So by retrieval, she means like retrieving parts that were kind of left behind in other timelines or other past lives or in the past, and retrieving that part of the soul and bringing it back into the present. So it absolutely can. Sometimes the past life work can turn into a soul retrieval. Oh, and I meant to say Sabrina. I kept saying Elizabeth, but I know that's Sabrina. Very meet, Sabrina. Okay, so any more questions, put them in the chat, and let me tell you what is coming up. So next week on 11/25, we are going to do an episode on soul contracts. So we're kind of going to continue talking about this. We're going to talk about soul contracts and karmic patterns because we are in this space between between Samhain and Yule. It's a great time to continue this conversation. On 11/26, I'm going to be doing, that's the Wednesday after next Tuesday, I'm going to be doing a free workshop on shadow work. I have not decided yet if this is going to be one of my older workshops that I'm going to do again and update it for the present, or if I'm going to do a full brand new workshop. But there will be a Zoom workshop that people can attend for free. And so you look for that information that will tell you about it. You'll find information on our YouTube page. We'll share when that's available in the comments there. We'll also share it in our Facebook group, Body Mind Witchcraft, and also if you're on our emailing list or email list. This is a good time for me to drop the link to the email list in the chat. If you are not already on the email list, make sure to join us here. You'll receive a copy of the Witch's Guide to Shadow Work for free, and then you will also then receive updates on what's coming up. You get the replays of these Ask Aislin videos weekly, as well as invitations to free workshops like that that are going to be coming up soon. So make sure to join us there. If you're watching back on YouTube, you will find that in the description of the video. Then on 12/2, I'll be doing an episode on magical timing. Now, I do want to let you know that our Shadow Seekers membership will be opening up from 11/28 to 12/4. So our Shadow Seekers membership, I've mentioned a couple times in tonight's episode, this is where we do the deeper work. We take what we're learning here in Ask Aislinn, we take it much deeper there. We have multiple past life regressions that people can do. We have a full-length workshop. It's like a hour and 45 minutes. It goes much deeper into all of this, and then we have plans to do more past life work. But we also do other things as well. We do a lot of shadow work. We do a lot of like working with the chakras. So if that sounds good for you, if you are looking for a way to kind of in a safe, supported container to do this kind of deep spiritual work, Shadow Seekers might be the great fit for you. We're going to have a really nice Black Friday offer coming up. And also to let you know, this is the last time that the membership will be available at the current price, because we're going up in price substantially next year. So this is a great time to join if you have been wanting to join us. And then I also want to let you know that our Demystifying Witchcraft course, which teaches the foundation of witchcraft, from casting circles to calling quarters to working with deities and lunar timing, solar timing, spell work, all of that. That course will be coming out between Yule and the first of the year. So I haven't decided if it's going to be a Yule package we're doing or a New Year's package that we're doing, but that course is coming out. And I know it's been much anticipated, so if you've been waiting for that, that will be here soon. We also have a Yule ritual that will be coming up on 12/20 or 12/21. I think we're leaning towards the date of 12/20. It's a Saturday. Everyone in our Shadow Seekers membership and our coven always comes for free, but if you're not in either of those groups, you can always get a ticket through donation and you'll be able to join us too. So look for all of that if you're on our mailing list or in one of the Facebook groups. You will also be able to get information that way. So hope that you enjoyed this episode. Leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere, and that will help us get this out to the feet of more people. Make sure to subscribe to the Body Mind Witchcraft YouTube channel, and you won't miss a single episode in the future. And until next time, blessed be, and happy past life exploring.